Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today and sharing some of your lunch hour with us. There's really two key areas on fundamental disruption that I want to talk about and share with you today. So first, I'll share with you my thoughts about mobility. When you think about mobility, I'm a civil engineer, and I joined civil engineering because civil engineers are those people that think about civilization. And if you think about our civilization today, it fundamentally would not have developed over the last 2,000, 3,000 years, 4,000 years without mobility. Because of the ability for people to move and people to move themselves and goods, it's because we have cities, and from there all the other things have developed. So mobility is core to really civilization, right? It's a very fundamental aspect, says the person who's from the Vehicle Technologies Office, of course. When you think about here in this country, we last year moved 11 billion tons of good. We moved people 3 trillion miles last year. Huge amount of movement. In fact, today, transportation is the second highest expense in the typical American household after the cost of housing itself. And 70% of all the petroleum that we use in the United States is used in transportation. So if you're thinking at all about petroleum use, it is largely in the transportation sector. There are some fundamental trends that are happening in the country right now that are shaping transportation. The first one, really looking at population. Today we have around 320 million people in this country, 320 million. Over the next 70 years, that's going to grow to almost 400 million people. Those people are concentrated in 11 megaregions today, and that concentration is going to actually increase. The amount of population that is concentrated is forecasted to increase. If you look then at who's making up that population, two key trends, right? Demographics. The aging population is growing dramatically. In fact, when you look at it, 1/3 of all the people that are over the age of 65, we're going to increase by 77%, have some form of disability or something that's limiting their mobility capabilities. When you think about that population growing that much and their need having new mobility services. In addition, when you look at the other side, the younger population, there are 73 million Americans who are under the age of 34. When you think about that's about a quarter, right, of the population they are today. Think about that group of people drives 20% less miles, fewer miles, I should say, than at the start of the decade, right? So it's a substantial change. You start rolling that through and look at how that will impact mobility. And of course, there's tremendous changes happening as well in technology, connectivity, automation, the raw computing power that we have both at a macro scale as well as a micro scale, and that ability to communicate across technologies. So when you put that together, what does that mean for transportation? We believe it means that transportation is undergoing the most fundamental disruption currently that it has seen ever, really. And I say ever, I'll say since you went from horses to actual electric or mechanized vehicles. So in the last 100 years, right, this is the type of transformation we're talking about when you think about phones that went from old rotary phones to what we have today. Just absolutely fundamental. So what will it mean for all of us? Certainly connected cars. Cars today are already starting to be far more connected, but your cars in the future are going to be connected vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure. That opens us a huge array of possibilities. The sharing of information, the sharing of mobility. So just thinking, use that analogy to your phones. As phones went from fundamentally what they were as a one static piece and you started connecting them, integrating them, it just blossomed, right? The same level of changes will happen in the mobility space. Certainly, new powertrains will come in. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, the question we often hear is automation. Is automation of vehicles coming? I am convinced now, and my thinking has evolved in this even in the last 6 months to a year, there is no question that we have the technology to automate vehicles at a very high level. There's already a significant amount of automation happening today. But we have the technology. I think the question will become, where are we going to use those vehicles? So automakers will have fully autonomous capable vehicles out on the road, 2021 type timeframe, 2022. Where will they be used? Where will they be driven? How will they be driven? Right? That implication, plus all these other things, are what's going to lead to this disruption. So from DOE's perspective, right, we're asking ourselves, what does this mean for us? What are the risks for energy consumption as you have all of this amount of change? Right? Transportation is such a huge part of the energy consumption picture today. If we have this much fundamental disruption, what will it mean for transportation, for energy? Will there be opportunities? Will there be more risk? And what does that mean for the research agenda we have? Where should we go with that? So we did a bounding study to look at all the different changes that could happen in mobility, what the impacts of that will be on the positive and the negative side. It's very interesting. What it told us is that on the, here's how you look at it, on the high end, if you look at all the changes that are going on in mobility, it could lead to up to 200% increase in energy consumption. So you think about all the work that's happening on fuel economy standards, other energy efficiency could be completely wiped out over and over again with a 200% increase in energy consumption. And when you think about it fundamentally, if you make something cheaper, which a lot of these technologies, in that scenario, a lot of these things are becoming cheaper, and you make it more accessible to the elderly, to the younger, to groups of people that can't currently drive, and you make it more convenient, more of it will be consumed in many different ways, right? And that leads to the positive energy implication. On the, the negative energy implication. On the positive side, though, the other scenario says that if we have all of the other levers pulled the right way, you can have up to a 60% reduction in energy consumption. This could be kind of that holy grail we're looking at. And this is without switching powertrains. That's just assuming we have the same mode of propulsion. A 60% reduction in energy consumption. When you think about what that means, why that would happen, the way I like to think of it is today, right, we all consume transportation in many different ways. When you go to the store to buy something, you're consuming transportation. The goods that went to the store, to the market, they use transportation to get there, like all of the chain around that. If in the future, each of us consumes only the amount of transportation we need at exactly the moment that we need it, sometimes, many of the time, all we need is one seat in a vehicle. Sometimes you need a big vehicle to tow a boat, but that's a pretty rare time. But now we tend to size our transportation needs to the one size fits all. If in the future between sharing, ride-hailing, physical vehicle size and design and architecture, right, as well as the ability to have multiple access that everyone's comfortable with to multiple parts of transportation could lead to that type of very positive energy future. So the other major disruption I want to talk about, so this is kind of one that all about how we consume transportation, what transportation even fundamentally looks like. The other part, when you think about the core technology, what's propelling those vehicles. So chart looking at the cost of batteries here, I want to show you. So if you look today, this green line represents going back to about 2010, where we were on the cost per kilowatt hour. We went from $1,000 a kilowatt hour to now under $220 a kilowatt hour. A dramatic decrease in cost. The key, though, is this blue range here is our estimate of what cost for batteries has to get to in order to be on parity with internal combustion engines. If you do that, if we get to that point, and now you have a vehicle where you can plug it in at home, it's a lot easier to actually refuel, it has lower cost, it has lower mechanization, there's a lot of reasons to believe, right, you'll have a dramatic takeoff in the technology. So this shows our projection of where we think that technology might plateau. So of course we're not stopping there. We currently have active research going on a more silicon-based battery technology that has the capability, is currently at a higher cost, but we believe it has the capability around 2022, 2024 to get down into that cost range. And then we've also started a major new initiative we call Battery 500, looking at lithium metal, lithium sulfur technology. Currently, it's up at a $320 range, but beyond that, the bigger issue is that it just doesn't quite work. There's some core fundamental problems, but we know what those problems are, and we're throwing the kitchen sink at trying to come up with new ideas, innovations, breakthroughs to solve those problems. If we can do that, we can get down into the $80 a kilowatt hour range and really be off to the races in a major way for electrification. So I said we'd talk about high performance computing. What does that mean? What do these things mean for us from a high-performance computing capability? We believe that solving some of these problems, both the question of how do you drive to the more energy-efficient future, as well as how do you get that battery cost down, lies with the use of high-performance computing tools, machine learning, and big data. We currently have significant initiatives going on in the battery space. When you think about batteries network, they go from a scale, a super small time scale, all the way up to a very long-lasting, years, right, of cycling back and forth. You look at the size, right, from the atomic level up through the full mechanical level of the battery. That basically means you have a very rich, complex, intense data source, which makes it ripe for machine learning capability and high-performance computing to try to help solve these problems, to develop all new materials, to understand new ways, the propagation patterns. In the case of big transportation, one of the key things that's going on when you look at these new changes in mobility and connectivity, it's like everything else in your life. You think about that last phone you bought, right? It had twice as much memory as the previous one because we're generating so much data. The same thing in transportation. As we connect all these vehicles, right, as we put automation on it, as we put cameras on it, we are generating huge amounts of data. A key thing we're asking ourselves If we now have all the data from the traffic lights, we have data from the vehicles, if we have that in real time, if we have it historically, and we can put patterns together, can we develop from a systems perspective an entire new way to optimize the overall system of mobility to be far more energy efficient between both the vehicles, how they operate, how they drive, the infrastructure they drive within, and even the decisions that people make. If we understand how people are making decisions about mobility, what drives those decisions, we think there's an opportunity to significantly improve the energy efficiency of the transportation sector. So to kind of recap, before I do that, one last quick slide. I put this here because I didn't want to forget. Lest you think that the Vehicle Technology Office only works on mobility and electrification, I wanted to point out actually that we have substantial amount of research going on in internal combustion engine vehicles, both light duty and heavy duty, on fuels. We believe that despite what I said about electrification, while we think that is coming and there's huge strides and dramatic changes, there's still going to be a very long future in place where we're going to be using liquid-based fuels and internal combustion engines. And we have substantial research also using high-performance computing techniques to try to drive significant improvements on both the engine side, coming with all new engines, as well as on the fuel side. So again, fundamental disruptions are coming, we believe. We believe electrification will play a significant role in there. The way we all consume transportation is going to change. We believe that DOE has great capability with our national labs to help solve a number of those problems. We like to think of it as our goal ultimately is a maximum mobility, minimum energy future. Get all that great benefit from added mobility, but do it in a way that's highly energy efficient. There's contact information, and you know where to find me here in the Vehicle Technologies Office if anyone has any questions down the road. If this sparks interest, you want to talk to some of our experts more about it. Thank you.